welcome to the agenda. Another Thursday night here. We've got my co-host Michael Connolly here with us tonight, and we've also got Dan Marks from Article5.org. I had a lot of friends this week that have been talking about the Article 5, and Dan and I had done some work a few years back, and we got pretty involved, and I still apologize to him every once in a while. He actually offered me a really good spot with Article5.org, and I didn't have the time to do it, and I tell you what, the man knows his stuff. He's, in my opinion, one of the best there is in this country that knows what this is doing. He's made a lifetime of work out of this. So I figured everybody could come on tonight that wanted to hear about this. I knew Dan. I knew it would be a good subject because, like I said, he is the foremost authority in my book. So, okay, well, we'll bring Dan in. Dan, are you here?
I am here. Aloha. Thanks for having me on the show. It's an honor to be here to talk to everybody, and I appreciate the time and attention to this subject.
Yeah, I know we had a lot here in Arizona. One of the groups that my wife works with, that Pepper works with, they were having a discussion, and she was showing me a few of the messages, and I don't do a lot with politics anymore as far as getting really involved. After the 2012 elections, I pretty much lost all, the government in my eyes lost all credibility anyway. As far as the election go, I know that elections are a farce. But there are things I know we can do constitutionally if we stand up as a country in unity. And what we have right now isn't unity, but we are getting there. Things are coming together. But first, I want to give Dan the opportunity to give himself an intro because I know there's a lot behind that. He's got so much going on, and we've really haven't talked a lot the last year, but I know he's been busy. I can look across the internet. If you look up Dan Marks and Article 5 Constitution, it pops up everywhere.
I get busy. I guess as a little bit of background for Article 5, just so everybody knows, Article 5 refers to Article 5 of the Constitution, which is the part of the Constitution which it describes how we amend our Constitution. And I'm going to paraphrase here very quickly. It reads that the Congress, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments. It's that simple. It's very small. It's a very small part of our Constitution. But I think a lot of times when we talk about this convention, people's eyes glaze over and they think that this is never going to happen, or that it's something we're pulling out of thin air. But this is a very real thing. It's just that we've never done it before, and we're long overdue, in my opinion. And so we've been taking action recently to try to get this going. And recently we've taken it to the Congress, and we can get into that now. Or did you have any other questions first?
Well, I know a lot of people are scared right now of an Article 5 convention, and the reason this is that they're afraid that if we have an Article 5 convention, what is going to keep Washington in check as far as totally taking reins over that and having all control over an Article 5 convention, that Washington will control what's taken in or put out, that Congress and the Senate will be the only ones with any say. And myself, I know that's not exactly the case, but I was wondering if you could maybe explain a little bit about how an Article 5 convention is contained and controlled, and how much control the people have over an Article 5 convention once it is approved.
Actually, it is contained to some extent, but it's not contained by Congress. It's contained by Article 5 itself. It is limited to amendments only. We can't go in there and rewrite the entire document. It's just plain not allowed. The other thing is that we cannot propose any amendments that would infringe upon the equal suffrage of states in the Senate without their approval. So basically, what they did is they tried to make sure that what they ended up with was better than what they started with. So they made it so that at the very worst possible scenario, all you could do would be to dismantle it to the point where it's back to the Articles of Confederation again. So it basically would reboot at the Articles of Confederation. That would be the worst case scenario if everybody just started stripping away things by amendments. But I mean, that's highly improbable. It's very hard to amend the Constitution, so we're really talking about a handful of amendments probably that would come through, and what those would be in a wide array of problems that face us today is hard to say, but they would have to be something that basically all sides agree to. It would have to be an American philosophy, not really a partisan philosophy. If you want to get something through, by 50%, go through Congress. But if you want to get something through and make it permanent, it better be something like equality of religion for everyone, and free speech for everyone, and privacy for everyone. It's got to be an across-the-board thing, or it just doesn't survive that kind of test when you send it out to the states. It requires 75% of the states, 38 states, to agree to this, any changes in the Constitution. So when you consider that, the only thing you're going to pass are very middle-of-the-road kind of issues, kind of nonpartisan, transpartisan issues.
I know we had done, what was it, about 3 years ago, I think now, that we did a little radio show about this with WTPN and me and you and John Heiser, and gosh, I don't remember who all was on there.
Right.
And at that time, it was actually, I think, a little bit more out in the open than it is now. That, or maybe I'm just not as out in the open as I was then. But it hasn't changed any. I mean, the thing of it is if we want to rein Washington back in, this is how we're going to have to do it, short of a civil war.
Well, you're right, and that's really, and I've said it before. This is the real dilemma of the Article 5 convention, is that people think that we don't need to go to this extreme until it gets really, 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 really bad, and maybe they're searching for that militating event that gets people really upset, and then they finally demand access to their Constitution. They invoke their right to alter or to abolish, as expressed in the Declaration of Independence, that we have a right to alter or to abolish this system of government when it no longer works for us. And I don't think that there's anybody out there, I mean, except for the top, 5% of America, that would say that this government is working for them. I know there's people that say that this government is broken in some ways, but it works really well for the top 5%, and that's really the problem. It wasn't meant to be a government of the top 5%. It was meant to be a government of the people, by the people, for the people.
Yeah, it originally had started out. We started out with a republic. And one of my favorite quotes, was, I believe it was, and now I can't remember who it was. They asked when he came out, he says, "What do we have?" And he said, "Well, you have a republic if you can keep it."
Ben Franklin.
Ben Franklin, yes. See, I knew it was one of them. I've had such a busy day. My head is like all out there.
Yeah.
But Dan, I think you're going to really like this, although you're only going to be able to hear part of it because we're going to be in the back room. But it's Jordan Page. Message of Liberty. But without any further ado, here's Jordan Page Liberty. It's 8:15. We will be back at 8:20, and we will carry on this conversation and dig into it. And hopefully we can get some callers in here. We've got one right now from the 443. We're fixing to talk to them. So here is Liberty, Jordan Page. And remember, JordanPageMusic.com, and you can go there and get all of Jordan's songs.
Why do we sit down when all should be standing? And why do we back down at the critical moment, like running away from the
All right. So hope everybody enjoyed that song. Give Michael a little crash course there in the back room. I think he's got it now. So everybody call in at once. Let's give him a test.
Oh, my God.
You're welcome, Michael. So I guess there is a bunch of questions for you, Dan. A lot of those are my wife, and they're the ones that we were talking about earlier. But she is also involved in the group I was telling you with that is very influential here in Arizona. So I guess we can just start going down the road there on some of those. She has some really good questions. And I guess the first one she said was, if Congress is not involved in the amending process, who is?
Oh, they definitely are. They are one of the two ways to propose amendments. But even when a convention call needs to be issued, it comes from Congress. And then they are allowed to pick the time and the place. And then once those amendments are proposed by that convention, Congress still has the authority to pick the method of ratification. And actually, that's an interesting point to bring up because they've only amended the Constitution or ratified the Constitution in a ratification convention once. Otherwise, they've always ratified amendments by state legislatures approving them. But this one time that they used ratification conventions was to repeal prohibition. And the reason that they did that was to take the politics out of it. They knew that if they gave this amendment to the state legislatures, they would have to run for re-election. And when they vote to repeal the prohibition, their hands get dirty with this, we want to legalize booze issue. So it was actually their actions, I think, speak for itself. That if you really want to try to propose reforms and get those through without the politicians, the stench of politics all over these things, you give it to a bunch of people and you let them sort it out.
Well, go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask Dan, who makes the determination that there needs to be a convention? I mean, how does that actually work?
The state legislatures, Nebraska's a unicameral system, but basically both houses have to apply to Congress for a petition for a convention, and it's a very there's no form for it. They can't, there's no form W69D or something like that they fill out. They actually they put together these things, and it's kind of they've got all the poetic license they need, but basically they just need to request a convention. The purpose that they are asking for this convention is basically irrelevant. All these applications add together. All these the applications, in some instances, they're not. They are asking for one specific amendment, and in my opinion, that is not an Article 5 application because in Article 5 itself, it says amendments in the plural. And if you're asking for one amendment, Congress does have the authority to create a convention for any subject, but it would be advisory. It wouldn't be mandatory for Congress to send that idea, whatever that convention comes up with, out to the states. However, convention, an Article 5 convention, it would be mandated because in Article 5 it does say in either case the amendments would be valid for all intents and purposes when ratified by 3/4 of the states. So, getting back to can Congress control it? Not really. They might set limitations for this convention, and they might say, well, we can only have it about the balanced budget amendment and, let's say, legalization of marijuana. And somebody comes up with something like we need a national initiative, and that passes. Well, that's beyond the scope of this convention. Would that be valid to all for all intents and purposes? The Constitution says it is. The Congress would only be allowed to pick the method of ratification, either by state legislature or by ratification convention in the states. So it's an interesting process. It's not terribly complicated, but it's new to a lot of people, and I don't think that's there's any mystery as to why they don't teach people about this particular form of proposing amendments, and that's mainly because it is a threat to the system itself. And so why teach us?
this is just like the grand jury. They don't want people to know about the grand jury either. And I know even here in Arizona, I know my wife's had this happen. They say, well, there's no grand jury here. There's a grand jury. You just got to get to it. It's like finding an illusion in the middle of a desert or something, But there is a grand jury. But the reason they don't want you to know about it is because that is how we take our grievances against our communities and the counties and state is through grand juries. And we're led to believe that the grand jury is there to indict drug addicts or to indict criminals. Yeah, it is, but it's there for the citizens to have a right to file against the state. That's what it was designed for. Was a citizens' court, and they don't teach us about that either.
Right.
And one of the other questions that we've got here, and I would like to hear your take on this one as well, Dan. And I know you've probably read some of these questions. You're probably going, "Wow."
Yeah, the next one's good. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it is. So after seeing the election fraud in 2012 that occurred with the help of state officials, and we know that's the case. Why should we trust the states to handle the election of delegates if that is how they are elected?
Honestly, and you may not like the answer, but that's all we've got. And if we're actually hoping that the system is going to correct this, there's no way. It's obvious this is happening on both sides of the aisle. We have testimony before states that people who have been hired to break into voting machines, they have been asked, can you secure these machines? No. Can you break into them? Yes. Piece of cake. That we're talking about the really, when you distill down all of the rights that we have, really the right to vote is one of the most fundamental primary rights of democracy. And if we have a tainted vote that's corrupted, adulterated, then really, come on, folks, we have lost democracy, and that's where you need to push the button here, the Article 5 button in the Constitution, and reboot, because it's obvious we are being governed and ruled, and we are not being represented, and it's something that we have to do. We have to play the cards we're dealt right now, because it's only going to get worse after every election cycle. This system is not going to clean itself up, and for all of the folks out there that would like to see things like Citizens United overturned, Congress has made no progress in 4 years.
They haven't even tried. I don't even think it's come up before Congress again in the last 4 years.
The balanced budget amendment, folks, have been going at this since the 80s.
Yeah, and then the Republicans come out. Boehner actually come out, or Harry Reid, he came out with Boehner and said, we're not even going to fight the Democrats on the budget. Let's just let them have it. Nobody do anything.
Well, let's go back even farther. Let's go back to the 1960s. 1965, they passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Mm-hmm. Martin Luther
1983, King, Section 1983, yep.
Marched in Selma, basically died, martyred for this cause. The Supreme Court this last summer nullified the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and now we're worse off than we were in 1965 because people will be stripped from the voting registry, and now there's no recourse. It's completely constitutional. Maybe you can file some papers with the state next time around, but this time, sorry, you don't get to vote.
One of the things with the RNC case that I helped a little bit with Richard Gilbert and Pepper worked on, and I worked on, and a lot of people worked on. Barbara Anderson, in Alaska, Edward True, in Maine. I mean, we had people all over the country. You were helping us a little bit here and there, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that, was based around Section 1983, which was updated the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And that's where the Voting Rights Act came from, 1965 Voting Act, which was ended up being 1972, 1973, 74 USC. And those arose from the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1873, I think it was. But it was really ironic that they overturned that this last summer, when that is what we tried to go through the circuit court on the Ninth Judicial Circuit in California with the RNC case, and then all of a sudden they come out and they overturn the voters' rights case, because that is what was the most, in my opinion, the most incremental part of proving voter fraud in the 2012 elections was that law, because a lot of people were saying, oh, well, that just has to do with the color of people's skin. Okay, when people are, and it says racism in there, but the thing of it is when anybody is denied their right to vote or to have their vote be heard, that is inequality in voting. It doesn't matter. It's not about racism. It's about inequality in voting. People can say it's about black and white or yellow or green or whatever skin they want, but that's not what the Voting Rights Act was. It was about equality for voting across the board,
right,
regardless of your political views or your ethnicity or your culture or your race. And the Congress and the Supreme Court made it into a racial issue. That's not what it was about. It was about equality. And like Dan was saying, now they've messed that up too. So it's really getting bad. I mean, America hasn't seen a debacle like the 2012 elections, and I guarantee you this, since 1912 and 2012. If you go look at four hats in the ring, and then you look at the election of 2012, where Ron Paul should have had it by all logical means, but the same things were in play here. And I was actually looking. There was an article that I'd known of, and I'd heard him do a speech on Article 5, and I can't find that anywhere online now. The one that Ron Paul did about Article 5.
I've heard him do a lot of things that would allude to the Founding Fathers and how they created the Constitution. I have not heard him specifically say that, and I know that he's very tight with the John Birch Society, and they are vehemently opposed to the Article 5 convention. So most of the anti-Article 5 rhetoric comes from the John Birch Society and the Eagle Forum, Phyllis Schlafly. It started around the 1960s. And during the 1960s, during just a 7-year period, there were about 170 states that applied for an Article 5 convention one way or another, just during a 7-year period. So Congress was doing a really, really good job of ignoring all of this.
No kidding.
And there was definitely a force generated to oppose all of this momentum coming from states at that time, and it really kind of manifested itself in there. But before then, you wouldn't see a lot of opposition to something that was basically just a constitutional function, something that we do in every state. We've had over 200 state conventions, constitutional conventions in states since the beginning of our country, and there are so many nations throughout the world that have done constitutional conventions. And for everyone that fears this convention happening, look back at all these states and all these different nations throughout the world, and it's happening today. And see what they talk about, see how it happens, and you'll realize that this is a very human experience where people get together and honestly try to sort out their problems and set their course and their mission for years to come. We used to be the new world, and it was the spirit of what we were then, and we are not the new world anymore. We need to really reinvent ourselves and set our mission, revive the Constitution. We know the Congress is stripping our rights right and left. We need to revive our Constitution and make it a relevant document in our government again.
I agree. I know a lot of people I talk to, they think the Constitution is either outdated or that it's status or that it's this or that it's that. And one thing that I think a lot of people miss with the Constitution overall is that it was written in mind for a God-fearing people. It was written for a country of morality and integrity, and with those, and a lot of people say, well, I'm not religious. Well, you don't have to be religious to have that morality or that integrity. But if you don't have that morality, you don't have that integrity, and you don't understand the responsibility that comes along with liberty and freedom and respecting everybody else's liberty and freedom, of course the Constitution isn't going to work because it's already been defeated before they start. Because if you don't give a shit about your country or other people's liberty or freedoms, then the whole idea of what this country was based on is already defeated before you've started. You've got to base your beliefs, first off, in honesty, trust in yourself, not trust in government, but trust in other. I wouldn't tell anybody to trust in government, but you've got to have morality, integrity, trust, and you've got to have respect for other people for our Constitution to work. And the reason that is outdated is because our social culture has taken those bits and pieces of humanity, and they've shredded those with communism since the early 1920s and 30s. Even Brezhnev said it takes three generations, or what do you say? I think it was 3 generations to totally brainwash a nation. And that's what we've got. We've got a brainwashed nation. Now, some of these younger kids that are coming up now, I've talked to a lot of younger kids between 15 and 25 that are really on top of the ball here because they've seen, they haven't been so involved, but they've seen the way politics has went. They've seen the way these wars have went. And I can tell you that those generations, when they start getting up to voting age and they start getting out in public, they're learning a lot more from the internet than they are from school. And I think the government is really scared of that because they're pushing really hard for this Common Core and stuff like this, and that's even taken away from the Constitution. So I think part of with the Article 5, I think what everybody is afraid of is having a runaway Congress. And one of those, another one of the questions that Pepper had here is: are amendments approved or proposed before the convention so the delegates would know what they are voting for?
Not only that, the American people will know what the delegates want. There are so many amendments that have been proposed over decades, and there's many that have lively, very energetic movements behind them right now, like Move to Amend, Wolfpack, Goldwater Institute has a balanced budget amendment out there. Convention of States has got a number of them. Liberty amendments by Mark Levin recently. He listed a bunch of amendments. So, there's a very good chance that Mark Levin, who's actually not a politician or any party, because he's advocating for amendments, would be, an ideal delegate for, whatever area he lives in, or But also, I would say
I would agree with you, though. I would agree with you.
Sure, but I think a lot of these people also will be. They would have to be people that people would trust and whatnot. But
you got to get mad, and really we do. We've got to get mad. You've got to take that apathy, and you've got to look at what Congress and what our elected officials have done. And ignoring us and what we want and why they've been put there. And you've got to get mad, and you've got to take that anger and put it into energy to get people into these positions. And just like Dan was saying, with delegates, we've got to come together as a unit in this country to get people in there, to get Thomas Jefferson's in there, to get Ben Franklin's in there, to get people in there, that will speak the mind of the American people, not just the upper 5%. And a lot of what we have in Washington right now, and what we have even in the UN, a lot of people don't realize. They say, oh, well, the president's got these executive orders. And I'm telling you right now, executive orders are not law. I keep pounding this into people's heads. Executive orders are not laws. They're implied consent. That means if you say I don't care, or if you don't answer, then it's accepted. But it's still not law. And everybody says, oh, if we get somebody in Washington, if we could, like a lot of people with Ron Paul, if we could just get Ron Paul elected, we could turn this whole country around. That's not the truth. Getting somebody in Washington as a president that will stand up is one thing. The thing is people don't realize is that we've been treated with the UN illegally because the UN is not a nation. It's not, it's not a legitimate body to be treated with. If you read the Constitution, it's not legitimate, but it's implied consent because nobody refuses. So the UN has all this say over what the U.S. does. You hear about the UN Small Arms Treaty, and everybody says, well, why is the UN involved in it? Because our leaders, the top 5%, have said, well, we don't want guns because if they realize what we're doing, they're gonna hang us in the streets. So we've got to get these guns away from them. So we've got to get people that really are genuinely interested in doing what we want done to protect the people, not to tax us to death and send us to our graves broke, put our children in socially conditioned corporate school education systems to create, a society of doers instead of thinkers. And the idea of an Article 5 convention is scary, but it is a tool we have. And like I said, we've got to do something to get this country back. Obviously, elections are not going to do it. So this is one of and I think this is about the only thing we have left to do this, unless somebody else has some other ideas. And I'd noticed, and I'll go back to one more question here that Pepper had. Because I really, I know the answer to this, but I want Dan to answer it. So Congress is the one who determines what the convention would be about?
They might try. They may suggest limits to the convention, but again, if they exceed those limits, it would still be valid for all intents and purposes when ratified by 75% of the states. So can they? They can try, but the delegates are free to choose their own agenda and vote how they like, and set their schedule. They're a separate branch, basically. It's a temporary fourth branch of government, is what we're talking about. Basically, it's kind of inconceivable and very foreign to even think that we have a fourth branch of government waiting there. And people might think that it's scary, and you know what? It is, but not to us. It is to them. This goes right to the very foundation of power in the United States. We can make drastic changes, simple changes, like one of the things that's going on. I think is it Arizona? I think Arizona has it, and I think San Francisco also instituted a multi-choice ballot where you can vote for more than one candidate. So if you like a third party, you can vote for them too, and it's just whoever gets the most votes. And when you think about it like that, that could completely break the two-party system because, you don't feel like you're throwing your vote away voting for a third-party candidate. So a very simple change to how we even count votes or how we vote could make a huge difference as to being a more representative system. And you spoke before about responsibility. There's very little duty expressed in the Constitution. We have jury duty, we have a duty to pay taxes, but in the Declaration of Independence, again, getting back to the right to alter and abolish. It says that we have a duty to throw off these oppressive governments. That is our duty. We don't have very many duties, and for those people that are afraid that we're going to go in there and maybe get rid of the Second Amendment, there's no way. There's just no way. It's way too controversial. There's no way 38 states are going to go with that.
There would be a war.
Right.
I have no doubt about that. Okay, so
Jerry,
this is hold on a minute. This is the thing, because Pepper just put in here, and this is part of. Anyways, I'll just shoot it right out there, and I don't know if you've seen this, Dan, but it's the issue. The issue that what is discussed or voted on is not determined until the convention. Okay, so the issue that whatever is going to be discussed or voted on would not be determined until the convention is happening, is what people are concerned about. What would your comment be to that, Dan?
Again, all of these delegates would suffer an election, and this election would be different than an election for Congress or president. It would be more about specific language. And because we're not talking about a long-term office, you're voting for somebody because, maybe they want to end prohibition. It's very popular right now. They want to overturn Citizens United. They want to end the Fed. That sounds like a great candidate to me. I'm going to vote for that person. Maybe it gets more specific than that, but basically we know the amendments, and we're really voting for the amendments almost more than that person.
Okay, now this is the thing. Now, are those put out to the public as this is why we want to have an Article 5 convention, or is that all nothing taken care of until the convention says, okay, we want to have an Article 5 convention? But there's no plan there. And then Congress says, okay, we're going to have one. Now, what do we want it for?
No. Once 2/3 of the states have applied for this, Congress must call the convention, and that's where we're at in this process right now. We don't have to talk about why we want a convention anymore. What we need to do, and this is what our action in Congress has been, and let me go back a little bit. Last year, I sent in a letter to the clerk of the U.S. House of Representatives at the instruction of Tom Wickham, the House parliamentarian. There is no form for this. He created a process for me that basically doesn't exist in our government. I wanted a formal tally and verification of the applications sent in to Congress, and there was some independent research of the congressional record from state legislatures that pulled out all of the applications throughout history and came up with well over 500, depending on how you look at it, from basically all 50 states. So I went through and I counted up state by state, and if I found one that looked like it met the requirements clearly, and I mean clearly, I put it down on the list, book and page, and I submitted it, and I asked them, as the clerk, to verify these as authentic and tabulate them and give us an official public record, because guessing is bullshit. That is the most ridiculous thing in the world, that we've gone over 200 years and they've never reported the official tally of where we're at. We don't know which states have applied and which states haven't, but I gave them 42 states. It takes 34. Once they start counting these things for the first time, where are they going to end up? It sure looks like they're going to pass that threshold and move us straight to a convention. They're required to, once they make that official. And the other thing is, as I was telling them in Congress, I got this through on the Senate side too, but as they're counting these, if by any chance you have any question as to whether they're valid or not, it's a two-way street. You can call the state you can check with the historian of that legislature and find out, did they really do this? And they will verify it for you. And it's amazing. They made this little loophole in the system so that they never have to count it, because they never assigned the duty to any entity in our federal government to count these things. So we are pounding on the door to get this thing going. It doesn't matter what the subject is to get it going. This is a request for a convention to propose amendments. The limitation, anything except something that dissolves the Senate. That's it.
So this would be primarily up to the states to determine what was going to go on in the convention?
No. The states are permitted in the Constitution to request this. They are taking part in a federal process. The governor does not need to sign these things. These are not legislation. These are states participating in a federal process. They are petitioning and asking for a convention, and the delegates that are selected by those states have the free will as an assembly, just like Congress. You wouldn't elect a senator for the purpose of passing said law. Mm-hmm. You know, you are electing a delegate to go represent your state and propose amendments and vote on them. That's
right.
it.
Yeah. Well, what I think people are really freaking out about is that they would have to send a politician into a Article 5 convention, and we don't have any honest politicians.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. But again, if there's something that weaselly that it's going to get it through 38 states, keep in mind, if you're
okay. Well, you just hit on something there. Okay, because it takes 38 states to approve one.
Right.
And without all 38, you can't have 37 states that say, yeah, we agree with doing away with the Second Amendment.
Right.
And it go through. It's got to be 38. And the chances of that happening are 1 in a million.
No, that's not going to happen. I can tell you with confidence that there will be plenty. This, again, it's not things that are controversial that are going to be able to get through there. You're looking for the more obvious things. We're going to get a handful of things. This requires so much consensus, a universality of opinion, that the kind of things we're looking at are possibly recall of senators. We're looking at national initiatives, national referendums. These things have been tried and tested in state constitutions, and there's no reason that we can't use some of these democratic tools, and they're going to be an obvious choice. And I mean, are these partisan things?
Well, see, this is the way I look at. Pepper says, McCain, I'm in. This is the way I look at an Article 5 convention. This is what's going to make or break Washington. Because if they do try to usurp those, I wish I could remember the entering line to, the preamble of the Constitution. When a government becomes so corrupt, that we need to do something. And I used to know that by heart, but like I said, I've really been out of politics for a long time because I just really lost heart in it. I really lost all faith and credibility in politics, totally, all the way down to the Constitution, even to a part. I still believe in the Constitution. I just don't believe in people. That's the thing. But if this goes to Washington, and Washington says, okay, we're going to strip the right of free press, you're going to see riots in the street.
Right.
Literally, they're not going to do that. If it goes to Washington and they say, we're going to take the Second Amendment, you're going to see an instant revolution. You're going to see so many hillbillies and people that aren't hillbillies. You're going to see suits and all kinds of people from all classes across this country come up with shotguns, rifles, pistols, knives, and everything else. Say, really? You're going to come take this from all of us? You're telling a whole country at one time you're going to take our guns? I don't think so. You remember what the Chinese said? We didn't want to come over there because behind every blade of grass is a gun. Well, I got news for Washington. It's still that way.
The problem really, we've made mistakes in the past. We passed prohibition, and it was basically a permanent change, but we had the ability to correct ourselves. We repealed it. Some of the things that Congress does are, we can't really. They make things that are superior to law. But what we need to do is just really revive this Constitution into a living, breathing document again, and we can propose changes. And once we kind of get the blood flowing again in the Constitution, if we make mistakes, and we will, I guarantee it, somewhere along the line we're probably going to make a mistake. But as long as we have the ability to alter our system of government, we can make those changes too. And when I talk about the right to alter or to abolish, this is not rhetoric, people. This is what they call an unalienable right.
We've got a caller that's called in, and he wants to, I don't know if he wants to ask questions or basically just make some statements. It's Jerry Klein. Do you want to invite him in, or how do you want to do that?
Mr. Klein, are you here?
I am.
Hey, well, welcome to the agenda. We have Dan Marks here, Jerry, Dan Marks, Jerry Klein, Michael Connolly. I think you guys have already talked. I said hi briefly before the song, so hello and welcome to the show. So what you got for us, Jerry?
Well, I'd like to start off by saying that I'm humbled to be on the air with such well-spoken men. Dan is quite eloquent in the way that he presents what it is that he's been presenting. The only problem is that I've been going back and forth between computer problems and phone problems, not to be able to hear the entirety of the content in which he has been speaking on as to the requirements of the invocation of this Article 5. But before I say that, before I get into that, I'd like to real quick dart back to something that you were speaking on, Jerry, quite well, I would like to add, in regards to the Constitution earlier, in where you were saying that, you'll remember you were saying something to the effect of, there's the argument out there that the document is outdated and doesn't fit, that whole line of conversation. And I immediately thought to myself two things that I see prominently wrong with the Constitution of the United States right now. Now, you guys, I'm sure, being a little more schooled and versed than I am in these things, would be able to tell me right off the top of the bat who it was that said something to the effect of the Constitution was written by geniuses so that even idiots could operate it. I'm not sure who said that, but it was one of the founding fathers, or someone, speaking of the founding fathers, someone very famous. And I would like to challenge that notion these days, because evidently whoever came up with that quote at the time, I'm sure they felt they were right, but if they were alive to see what was going on now, I think they might recant their quote. Because evidently the geniuses weren't as smart as they thought they were, because evidently these idiots cannot run it. Now, going forward from there, the two key things that I see wrong with the Constitution today are, one, that it was written at a time where the fashion in which it was written was considered to be in layman's terms, because the educational level of the people, now I'm not, please, let's make the distinction between technology and technological advancements and actual educational and scholastic intelligence. Those men knew how to write, they knew how to speak, they knew how to convey, they knew how to use logic, principle, common sense, and they wrote that document in what would be considered to be layman's terms for that day that it was written. Now you fast forward 200 years to where people can't even spell Constitution, let alone know that they even have one on a vast majority of the people out there. You expect them to understand old world English that attempts to explain very foreign ideas to a dumbed down populace that aren't even aware that they have the rights or this Constitution to begin with. That's number one. Number two, and probably more importantly and applicable in this day and age, is that cover your ears, goddamn piece of paper flies directly in the face of and is in direct opposition to big business because it gets in the way of letting them do whatever they want to do. And that's where the money and the power is. And if you think that they're going to let that go just without a fight, I think you're kind of, you've got rose-colored glasses on. Now, digressing back to the fact that I am not fully aware of what it would take to invoke this article. I heard something about a certain percentage of the states I caught that much. But it also seems to me that I caught something about Mr. Marks saying that it would require both the House and the Senate to grant this. Now, this is where I may have missed some of the details that would allow me to fully understand this process. But based on the staccato information that I was able to glean while I was battling my phone and PC problem here, it seems to me that, the first part of my cynical side went to myself, let's see, they can't agree on a budget, they can't agree on amnesty, they can't agree on, X, Y, and Z. All of a sudden, we're going to hold hands, sing Kumbaya, and somehow think that we can get the House and the Senate to work in conjunction on something as to them, I'm sure, would be as foreign as this article that Mr. Marks is presenting.
Hmm.
Actually, the quote you had, Hillary equals France. I hate to sink the GOP's toy boat, but it was the French who inspired the U.S. Constitution. A document written by geniuses, so it could be followed by idiots.
Okay.
That was actually a quote by Bill Maher.
Bill Maher.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it went further back in history than that.
I thought it did too, but I just happened to look it up.
I think he plagiarized it. I think he plagiarized. Well, no.
Well, that wouldn't
plagiarized
surprise me.
it off of somebody.
It is true, though.
Because the level of intellect that it would have taken to come up with that original of an idea, I don't think Mr. Maher possesses.
It is true, though, that the Constitution at the time was not written in legalese. It was written in plain English. It was meant to be a document of we the people, not we the government. And the problem that we have is really ever since Marbury versus Madison, the Constitution has become a thing of wax, as Jefferson said, for the Supreme Court to mold in whatever way it wants. And what we have is a Constitution that is now drifted so far from the original intent, so that now all of a sudden speech equals money and corporations are people, and we know that's not the case. That was not the intent. They also say things like, well, now you don't have a right to remain silent. You don't have a right to privacy like you thought you did. The Supreme Court is already stripping us, and the president with executive orders, and Congress with things like NDAA and the Patriot Act, have been stripping away the rights. And honestly, when we talk about things like in the Constitution, there's only two ways to amend the Constitution, and we have been depending on Congress, but we have to discover our own authority. as we the people to say, hey, that is our document. This is our government. Let go or be dragged. We need to take all of this back.
I was going to say, may I ask how the Supreme Court would factor into all of this?
They would have the...
Or would it not?
If something's challenged based on one of those amendments, they would have the right to interpret that. But then again, if they mess that up, once we start this process of calling a convention, it's been so long. We have to demonstrate to the American people and basically prove to them that what every state and country does on the face of this planet is actually quite safe, and we're very capable of getting together. And it's not a matter of singing "Kumbaya." Suddenly, we'll figure out how to, instate English as the official language of the country. I got to be honest with you, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in a convention. That particular issue is not going to get the support of 2/3 of the delegates and 75% of the states. It's not broad enough, and you might get something like that through. I'm just using that for example. You might get one of those things through Congress or something like that, but really, the fear that's generated about this is just not founded on any convention that's ever happened in the history of mankind. And for those that really, really stoke the fears of, we can't, it's just like all those people who say, we've got to get rid of guns because what, you can't defend yourself? People, this is, it's a dangerous thing, but we could end up blowing our foot off. It's very possible. But once we start this change and we start to be able to realize that it's not going to be an absolutely chaotic event, but more a search for middle ground, I think that we will be able to do this again. And I think we should do these kinds of things like every 20 to 25 years, like Jefferson said, the Tree of Liberty needs to be refreshed. And we have not refreshed our government for quite a long time, and it is very obvious that it is not working for us, and it is obsolete. And when things are obsolete, you condemn them.
The thing of it is, with the fear of having an Article 5 convention, and people are afraid that, it'll be open to amended. This is the simplest way I know how to put it is it's being bypassed anyway, folks. The Constitution is being trampled on, spit on, tore up, threw off to the side, tossed out a window doing 90 mile an hour down the highway. Because right now it doesn't matter if it's amended or not. The government right now at this time is blowing off the Constitution by passing presidential orders, executive orders. They're passing illegal laws. They're enacting illegal, I don't even know what to call them. They're not laws, but when they can do stuff like the NDDA, the Patriot Act, NSA, Homeland Security, when they're asking for your papers when you're walking down the street or at a train station or anywhere you go, when they can pull you over on the side of the road, search your car, and tell you that they can because they're the law, we don't have a Constitution anyway. So I don't really, I guess myself, see the big fear in having this open for to be amended when without doing it, we're showing them that we're not going to do anything about it. But if we do it, even if we do it and blow our foot off, at least we're trying to hang on to what we have.
Right.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
I was going to say, too, it would flash back again to, the Cold War. And we knew the Soviet Union had the KGB spying on them all the time. And we were, in our country, feeling free and saying, why don't these people do something to throw off their government or fix it? Or here we are. We've got our own KGB. We've got the NSA. And, it's been proven. We have, and we're really good at it, too. I mean, we are phenomenal at spying on our own people. Without warrants,
and everybody else's people.
That's right. So, there's no question. This government is jumped the tracks, gone rogue, however you want to describe it. We've got to rein it back in. We've got to protect ourselves from the encroachment of the federal government on our liberties.
Well, if I could add in, from now I don't know from what walks of life that each of us individually come, but I can tell you from my very middle class lifestyle and the view that I see at my level with my peers and so on and so forth, is that and I may wax a little cynical here, but to turbocharge what you just said, it almost feels as a bit of an understatement in that I want to peel all of the glitter off of it and call it, from at least my perspective. I'm sorry, are you there?
Yeah.
Hello? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I cut out. At least from my perspective, what seems to be an extremely criminal government that knows exactly what they're doing. And they know they've been caught. They know they're guilty. They know they're caged in the corner, and they are not going to come out without a fight. And now, throughout the course of this phone conversation, I've heard nothing but superb logic, superb diplomacy, and as I believe it was Jerry just said, at least if we end up blowing our foot off in the process, at least we've tried something, which I fully understand. But it is my position, or at least it feels from my perspective, that exactly what, I won't say the whole government, but I will say many factions or sects within inside it are actually trying to manipulate us into a physical confrontation with them to be able to, at least from their standpoint, operate from a position of authority and morality as a result of an insurgency. And that's what it seems like to me. I mean, and so I always tend to break things down into simple analogies. And I'm sure that, I don't know about you, Mr. Marks or Michael, but I feel reasonably sure I can speak on behalf of Jerry and myself that we've seen some bar fights go down in the past, and you can stand there and try to induce induct into it all of the diplomacy you want, but at some point, them two guys are going to get to fighting. No matter what kind of words you throw into the mix and try to settle them down. So, of course we keep trying every channel, every legal channel, every diplomatic channel, every logical, legal channel that we can. But at the same time, I envision Tony Soprano sitting up there, or Don Corleone, if it fits your genre a little better, sitting up there laughing, going, "Hey, guess what? They're filing a piece of paper."
Well, you've touched on something there that is, really one of my ultimate fears working in this effort. And as I look back through history, there were attempts to get rid of slavery with abolitionist conventions prior to the Civil War. And again, people wanted to get together. There were applications made by states, but they didn't wait for Congress. They just started having abolitionist conventions back then. And in fact, that was the first time they started talking about the right to vote for women, too. And they weren't. That was beyond the scope of the convention. So you can expect these kinds of things to happen when you get people together. But The ultimate fear that I have is that people are waiting for that militating event to happen so that they can finally say, all right, we finally need to recognize and admit that we have to fix things. And I hope that we don't get to a militating event and it starts to fight, because then we're just going to be just like that abolitionist movement almost back then. And the only way to resolve it will be fighting things out. And we are modern people. We do not need to spill blood and spend our fortune at preserving our liberties. Our founders gave us a perfectly a deliberate way to peacefully work out our differences and set the course for our nation. Right now, all our government can do is raise debt and start war. That's it. It's not working. So it's painfully obvious to me. I hope that people start to realize that again, you need to use your own authority. You have the right as an American. The power of our government is derived from the consent of the governed. Once it is perfectly clear that the American people are ready to amend their Constitution, and they vocalize that, and it's a clear call from the American people, they won't be able to stop this anymore. What we're doing is hopefully turning the rules inside out on them and making them count these states for the first time, and hopefully they'll do that. But honestly, without the public pressure, this has been going on for over a year. But John Boehner finally passed this to the Judiciary Committee in the House, so it would finally get considered. The Senate passed it to their Judiciary Committee right away. I've been talking with the subcommittee on the Constitution in both houses about this, trying to get some action on this, and it's been slow in coming. And frankly, we the people don't need to put up with this. We're not asking states to ask the federal government to let us amend the Constitution. This really isn't up to the state legislatures as much either, because the document belongs to us. We own it. That is why it is our right to alter and abolish it anytime we please. It's ours.
Yes, they do. Very much so. It's really, I think this is part of a great divide among a lot of the liberty movement. And the reason I say that is because there are people that, and rightly so, that don't trust the government. I don't trust the government. I don't trust them as far as I can throw the house I'm in. Not at all. And and Dan, I know you don't either.
No.
But the thing of it is what this is, basically what this is, and if any of you guys out there that play poker, what this is calling a bluff, is what it is. Exactly what it is. Call a spade a spade. It's calling a bluff. What we're saying, if we go into an Article 5 convention, what we're saying is put your money where your mouth is. Because if they come out with a card up their sleeve, there's going to be trouble, and they know this.
You're trying to force them out into the open.
Yeah, and if the American people see on a big scale, because this won't be something they can hide. This won't be something they can buy out the TV stations with. That won't happen.
It'll be covered and covered and covered.
Yeah, this isn't something they can hide. It's not something they can say, such and such bought a new Lamborghini today, and they wore this sequin dress to the New York Times, and blah, blah, blah. No, ain't none of that going to happen. Because if an Article 5 convention went down, and Washington actually usurped the people in that big of a step, and they actually took away any more out of of our civil rights. Right now, it's on the verge without an Article 5 convention, and if that happens, there is no political solution. It's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be the worst war this earth has ever seen. I will guarantee you that, because our country has more arms than the entire world put together. You hear all these, Russia has all these nuclear bombs. You know what? You put 10 million handguns up next to one nuclear bomb, and let's see which one is messier. There's not going to be much difference.
The original our Civil War was one of it was the bloodiest war in our history, and I mean, they thought that the last man alive was going to win that war. That was going to kill everybody.
600,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, it's to think of what we could do to ourselves with that kind of ferocious battling with today's modern technology, tools, biotechnology, germ warfare. Oh my God, it's that is the last thing we need.
I hope that well, let me make it perfectly clear. I am not saying that I think that violence is the solution, and by all means, I would certainly, and maybe I didn't state it strongly enough, but I certainly want to give diplomacy and the legal channels, as I mentioned, every last chance to resolve, at least a large majority of the larger problems that we have right now, so that we can start heading back in a direction to where we can work on the more mundane. But I just hope that I did not appear as if I were calling for that, because I'm certainly not.
No, I didn't get that impression.
I don't think any of us are going that direction.
No.
If anything, it's a warning against that.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what I was saying. Because if we don't use the tools that we have, and I don't ever make predictions, but I'll make a prediction here. Within the next 10 years, if we don't straighten something out with this government, between the government and the people, we've already got, constitutional sheriffs telling the federal government, if you come into my state, we're going to meet you with firearms. If you come to take our guns, we're going to blow your head off. We've got states saying this to the federal government. We've got sheriffs saying this to the federal government. This isn't bullshit. This is a fact. It's a well-known fact. We've got states that are saying we want to secede from the United States. We've got states that are saying, you're not going to tell us how to make our laws. Arizona is one of those. You're not going to tell us what we can do with our state. And the federal government coming back and say, yeah, we are. We'll be, I'll be damned if you're going to tell me what I'm going to do. You're my child. If we don't do something within the next 10 years, if we just keep going at this rate that we're going, I promise you there's going to, and I'm not saying I'm not advocating it, I'm not saying I want this, but I'm telling you there's going to be a civil war in this country. There's going to be a bloody, nasty, mean, deadly civil war in this country, because people are going to get fed up with being pushed down. And you look at Marxist theory, and I don't like Marx theory, I don't like Darwinist theory, but it's a fact of life in this culture. Because when the burgoys are so far down that they have to rise up against the proletariat, that happens. When you have people that are put under thumb, when they're put under slavery for so long, when you back somebody into a corner where they have nothing left to lose, the only thing they have left is their life. And if they either forfeit that or they fight for it. And a man will fight just as hard as a tiger will when you put him in a corner, when all that's left is his life and his family.
Yeah, the middle class is being squeezed so much. I mean, it's everybody, and it really, it's not going to take too much for people to realize that these things that are happening, they affect you on a personal level, and we've got to do something. I'd like to point out a quote here too. In Thomas Jefferson, one of his letters in 1816, well after the Constitution was written, he said that basically this corporeal globe and everything upon it belong to its present corporeal inhabitants. During their generation, they alone have the right to direct what is the concern of themselves alone, and to declare the law of that direction. And this declaration can only be made by their majority. That majority then has the right to depute representatives to a convention and to make the Constitution what they think will be best for themselves. This is exactly what he was dreaming about then. And we are finally ready for this. We have no choice. We either change or perish. We just don't have any choice. We have to change.
I agree totally. Are you still with us, Michael?
What happens?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just listening. I'm enjoying this conversation that you guys are having. I'm learning a lot of things. But, the thing of it is that one of my favorite writers, Lysander Spooner, who was an anarchist in a way, his position about the Constitution was that the Constitution was written for those who wrote it, and that in his time, all of the people who had anything to do with that Constitution had died, and in his position, therefore, the Constitution died. And I'm almost inclined to agree with that in a way because of the fact that ever since Abraham Lincoln, we really haven't had a Constitution per se. I mean, we've had the you can own your own weapons and prevent soldiers from bedding down in your house and all this kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is that I don't see anything that the government is doing that even remotely resembles the Constitution whatsoever. I mean, I voice my opinion. You guys voice your opinion, but how far does that go? You can sit there and go visit your representatives all day long, and if they just simply don't want to hear what you've got to say, it's, okay, well, that's fine. I will make sure I bring that up, and then you're escorted out the door. If we don't do something, and I'm like Jerry. I'm not advocating a bloody revolution, but when you think about it, the revolution that we did have, there was only 3% of the people that actually even wanted it, and it went ahead. So the end result is that, as Spooner says, the Constitution was usurped from the get-go, and those of us who now want the original Constitution back, that means something. Jerry was absolutely right when he said we've got to get back to what the Constitution originally meant. We've got to become a moral society again. We're bankrupt in so many ways that I'm almost afraid that we're right on the edge of that slippery slope. And I just don't know which way is the best way to go. I don't want to see bloodshed in any shape or form, but I'm almost convinced that it's going to have to take a revolution of sorts to get us back to where I think we need to be.
Well, every time any culture has a revolution, they still need to roll up their sleeves and do the paperwork at the end of that revolution in order to establish their new form of government. And again, we are modern people. We don't have to do that. We can skip the violence and get straight to, rolling up our sleeves and figuring things out.
Well, the Article 5, it seems to me like, because I knew of its existence, I just didn't really pay that much attention to the finer details. But it seems to me like, that as I listen to you guys talk, that the average Joe who sits in a coffee shop talking about, well, we need to try to get the Constitution amended for whatever reason, that they run into a brick wall every time they do that, which is similar to the nullification process. A judge is not required to tell a jury about nullification. And if they're not educated to that, then they don't know about that. And so I appreciate very much what you're doing, Dan, because at least the information is getting out there.
Mm-hmm. The other thing, too, you mentioned that it basically saying that the Constitution isn't obeyed. Congress is always not abiding by it. That it kind of died a long time ago. And it's very true. And part of the big problem, and I hope that this would get addressed in this kind of convention, and this is why you can't let Congress set up limitations, because really you want to address how Congress works too. And there's got to be some way to make write it into the Constitution, and I mean, I have a vague idea of what it should look like, but it's really up to us, the American people, to decide how to write this and how to state it in the Constitution. But, right now, our Constitution is enforced by oath, a promise. That means all of these politicians are promising that they're going to obey the Constitution. That promise to today's modern politician doesn't mean spit. And we need to enforce this Constitution by law and not allow the government to deviate from this Constitution. Now, whether that would be a council of governors to make this kind of decision, obviously the Supreme Court, if it's saying that we don't have the right to speak anymore or right to remain silent, where are they coming up with this stuff? It maybe a council of 50 governors would be the best way to take a look at potentially nullifying some of the actions of the federal government, because our states don't work for the federal government. Our federal government works for the states.
You guys know what? And this is going to seem kind of cliche, but I just have an overwhelming feeling that I need to read this, and it's going to take me. It's going to take me about a minute to read it. But I really think this needs to be heard, and I want to actually have Donnie edit this, and I'll put it out as on its own. This was written March 23rd, 1775, and before I get through this, I know a few of you are probably going to know what it is, but I want to. And I was sitting here looking at it, going, "Oh, I want to read this little piece out of it. No, I want to read this little piece out of it." And I got to thinking about the way things are today and what's going on today, and I thought, you know what? I'm just going to read this whole thing. So it's going to take me about a minute, if that's okay with you guys. Okay.
Go for it.
No man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism, as well as abilities, of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed the House. But different men often see the same subject in different lights, and therefore I hope it will not be thought disrespectful to those gentlemen if, entertaining as I do, opinions of character very opposite to theirs, I shall speak forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. This is no time for ceremony. The question before the House is one of awful moment to this country. For my own part, I consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery, and in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of the debate. It is only in this way that we can hope to arrive at a truth and fulfill the great responsibility which we have to God and our country. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time through fear of giving offense, I should consider myself as guilty of treason towards my country and an act of disloyalty towards the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings. My President, it is natural to man to indulge in the illusions of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against the painful truth and listen to the song of the siren till she transforms us into beast. Is this the part of wise men engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be of the number of those who, having eyes, see not, and having ears, hear not, the things which so nearly concern their temporal salvation? For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst, and to provide for it. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging the future by the past, and judging by the past, I wish to know what there has been in the conduct of the British ministry for the last 10 years to justify those hopes with which gentlemen have been pleased to solace themselves at the House. Is it this insidious smile with which our petition has been lately received? Trust it not, sir. It will prove a snare to your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with those warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our land. Are fleets and our armies necessary to work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called in to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. I ask, gentlemen, sir, what means this martial array if it's proposed be not to force us to submission? Can gentlemen assign any other possible motive for it? Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for all this accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir, she has none. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. They are sent over to bind and rivet us, those chains which the British ministry have long been forgoing. And what have we to oppose to them? Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. Have we anything new to offer upon the subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up in every light which is capable. but it has been all in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? What terms shall we find which have not been already exhausted? Let us not, I beseech you, sir, deceive ourselves. Sir, we have done everything that we could done to avert the storm which is now coming on. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne, and have implored its interposition to arrest the tyrannical hands of the ministry and parliament. And I want to add to this, and that, in our case, government. Our petitions have been slighted. Our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult. We have the NDDA, the NSA, the Homeland Security. Our supplications have been disregarded, TSA. And we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne, or as in this case, the presidency and Congress. In vain, after these things, may we indulge the fond hope of peace and reconciliation. There is no longer any room for hope if we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve and violate those inestimable privileges for which we have so long been contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged, and which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest shall be obtained, we must fight. I repeat, sir, we must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left of us. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be next week or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and when the British Guard, or in this case NSA or TSA or whichever one that our government wants to choose, shall we be stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength by resolution and inaction? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs and hugging to the delusive phantom of hope until our enemies shall have bound us hand and foot? Sir, we are not weak. If we make proper use of those means by which God of nature hath placed in our power, the millions of people armed by the holy cause of liberty, which I want to emphasize here, liberty, the right to be left alone, and in such a country as that is we possess, are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations. That includes the U.S., that includes Syria, that includes Iran, that includes Egypt, that includes all these countries across the earth. And who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us? The battle, sir, is not the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, the brave. Besides, sir, we have no election. And we don't. If you literally, with this sentence here, if you look at the elections in 2012, we have no election. If we were base enough to desire it, it is now too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat but into submission and slavery, and we're already there. We have been for 50 years. Our chains are forged. Their clanking may be heard on the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable. Let it come. I repeat, sir, let it come. It is in vain, sir, to insinuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring into our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. We stand here idle. Why is that, gentlemen? What is that gentleman wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? As in our case, for protection and taxes, forbid it. Almighty God, I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Do I even have to say who that was? Exactly.
You know, I have to agree. I spend more time trying to persuade people, as John Adams did way back when, that people, the war is upon us. We were slaughtered at the Boston Massacre. Right now, we are occupied by a military force. We don't have a police force anymore. We have police that are kicking down doors and riddling cars with bullets.
And those are for us.
Right. Does anybody feel safer, or does it feel like we are a second-class citizen, where the top 5% can break the law and get away with it? They can launder drug money through banks and get away with it. But we are subject to the most benign laws. Gardening in your yard. It's amazing what laws are being imposed on us on our own property. we've had eminent domain used against our property long enough. This government is obsolete. We need to take this back, almost like the power of eminent domain, in very many respects exactly like the power of eminent domain, and declare this government obsolete and start over again if we have to. We're at the last, really, like you said, this Article 5 thing is kind of the last step. And if we cannot get Congress to count the applications from state legislatures, I'm used to having my rights violated, but the power of a state completely ignored over 200 years is unthinkable. And once it becomes much more obvious to people that they have, the history shows that we probably crossed the threshold for this in 1907. The state of Utah made an application where they counted up 37 states in the application and were saying, is this a government of the people? Do we really rule our government? And in the application, it was saying that it wanted things like national initiative and an anti-corruption act. They wanted recall of senators, very structural things. It's just amazing that they could have altered our history so much. It's like if you had just learned that they were supposed to elect a president in 1907, and Congress decided back then that, gosh, we don't really want to put all that power in the hands of one man. So what did you want the president to do? We'll take care of that for you. Forget about that whole president thing. We've got this. And I'm sorry, but I'm not buying it. We could have had the right to vote for blacks, for women, and a host of other issues decades earlier than they were passed. And like I said, the balanced budget amendment may not pass the way it is, but if you let people assemble and deliberate about these ideas, we could have found middle ground in decades ago, and we might not be in the trouble we're in right now. If they had amended the Constitution for civil rights back then in the 60s, the Supreme Court wouldn't have nullified the Voting Rights Act of 1965, but we still have 18-year-olds voting. That's permanent. That's all they got out of that was they lowered the voting age to 18. So, let's put some points on the board finally.
I can't believe we're almost out of time. It's been an awesome show. Thank you, Jerry, for coming on. Jerry Klein, thank you for being here.
It's been my pleasure.
Your input, your questions, your comments were very much appreciated. I want to thank everybody for tuning into the show and being in the chat. I want to thank my wife, Pepper. She's really given us a lot of good questions, and she's supported me a lot on this. And we've had a few words in and out through this little thing here, but I love her to death, and I really respect what she does. I just want to put that out there. She fights really hard for our liberties, just like we all do. She's a 100-pound pit bull. But Dan, I am so thankful for you to be here. I would love to have you back again soon. If you can come back, maybe we can do a part 2.
Sure.
We could talk all night. I think the last time we did this, me and you talked for about 4 hours. So.
Yeah, I have meetings sometimes that take a long time. So yeah, I'm used to this kind of stuff.
So, I if we can do it real quick, you have any last words, Dan? We have like 2 minutes, and my outro is almost 2 minutes. So.
Well, real quick, thanks for having me on. It's been an honor for me to be here, really. I appreciate talking to everybody and your audience. I talk to Occupy all the time, so I'd love to talk to a lot of people about this. This is something that affects everybody, and that's basically it. I just hope that everybody realizes that the next evolution of democracy is going to come about by peaceful means.
Me too. I really do. I hope it comes out good, and I want to thank everybody. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jerry. You guys can go to bapnation.com, show us a little love and support. We could really use it. JordanPageMusic.com. Y'all have a good weekend, and I hope to catch you next Thursday. Good night, everybody, from everybody at Agenda.
Good night, Gary. Thank you. Enjoy this.
Aloha.
Aloha.